Earlier today, two of Donald Trump's potential running mates were interviewed and asked questions about the potential weaponization of justice in a second Trump administration. And while both of them lied, one of them hinted that there would be prosecutions of Trump's political enemies, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. And the two people that we're going to be talking about the most, other than Trump himself, are two Republican senators, J.D. Vance of Ohio and Marco Rubio from Florida. Now, both of these men are in the running to be Donald Trump's potential vice presidential running mate, okay, which would make them the second highest ranking person in a Trump executive branch. And to the credit of the interviewers in both arenas, one on NBC and the other one on CNN, both of them were asked about Donald Trump's repeated threats, repeated promises to prosecute his political opponents. We're going to start with J.D. Vance because, in my opinion, it's the worst. Not only did he lie like Marco Rubio does, but he also hints that, yes, actually, it would be good to prosecute Donald Trump's political enemies. We're going to play the clips and unpack them together.
This point, Kristen, that the prosecution of Donald Trump in New York, which I think now is fundamentally been thrown in doubt by this immunity case, it was one of the main guys was a Department of Justice official in the Biden administration who jumped ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after Donald Trump.
And yet the DOJ
if that
told
doesn't make you question the legitimacy of the prosecution, that's a problem.
Well, Senator, that happens all the time. People are appointed from Washington, but the DOJ told Congress, testified this week
Kristen,
that it reviewed
it happens.
Hold on, Senator,
are
let
you
me
really
finish.
saying, Kristen,
Senator, let me finish my sentence,
all the
then
time?
I'll let you finish. Hold on.
The numbers.
Let me just finish this. The DOJ told Congress this week it reviewed all communications since Biden took office and found no contact between federal prosecutors and those involved with that case in New York. Can you stick to the substance of the question, though? Let me just ask, because I just want to stick with this line of theory that you are laying out, which is you are saying it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department. If it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department, as you say, which there's no evidence of that, why is it okay for Donald Trump to do that?
Well, Kristen, first of all, you said that it happens all the time, that the number 3 person in the Department of Justice jumps ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after the president's political opponent. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of American democracy, and I don't think that we should legitimize it. Now, if Donald Trump's attorney general had his number 2 or his number 3 jump ship to a local prosecutor's office in Ohio or Wisconsin, and that person then went after Donald Trump's political opposition, that's a different conversation.
Senator,
all he's suggesting is that we should investigate credible arguments of wrongdoing. That's all that Donald Trump is saying. That is not a threat to democracy. That's merely reinforcing our system of law and government.
Bottom line, you are okay with Donald Trump appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, which would include Joe Biden. You're just, to button that up, it sounds like you're saying yes. Let me move on, though, to my next question.
So there was so much packed in there. So a couple of things. Kristen Welker was correct to point out that there is an incestuous relationship between organs of justice in this country, in the sense that people leave state and local government to go to the federal government and vice versa. Now, J.D. Vance is saying, well, this was a particularly high-ranking official under the Biden administration who left to join Alvin Bragg's department to prosecute Donald Trump. Well, it may be the highest ranking instance, but there's nothing unusual about that. He would need to prove that there's something particularly sinister about such a high ranking official. Instead, it just may be the first time someone that high ranking has left the federal government to go work for state government. Again, nothing inherently difficult about that. He also suggests that Attorney General Merrick Garland directed this number 3 in the Department of Justice to go join Alvin Bragg's prosecution of Donald Trump in New York. There is no evidence of that. As Kristen Welker points out, the Justice Department has reviewed its internal communications to see if there was any sort of direct involvement between the federal government and the federal Justice Department and Alvin Bragg's department, the district attorney of Manhattan, and there was none. And the Republicans have no evidence of any sort of communication. They are relying on hearsay and innuendo to try to cast aspersions about Alvin Bragg's prosecution of Trump. But again, see what he's doing. So this is in the aftermath of a Supreme Court decision which supposedly immunizes presidents, right? And this is what J.D. Vance wants. J.D. Vance has repeatedly said he felt it was appropriate for presidents and former presidents to be given extraordinary immunity protections. And yet, despite that, J.D. Vance is leaving, and we'll play it in another clip where, again, he seems to really support this, where he is leaving open and supporting the idea of the incoming Trump administration, if such a thing happens, to prosecute Joe Biden, the former president. You see the staggering hypocrisy? Republicans can't ever stick to a single standard. They want presidents to be immune, but only really Republican presidents. And, he tries to couch it. He was like, well, listen, we're not talking about going after political opponents. We're talking about prosecuting legitimate potential crimes. Well, that's exactly how Merrick Garland under the Biden administration has pitched its prosecution of Trump. But again, what it comes down to is J.D. Vance thinks it's okay for Democrats to be prosecuted, including Democratic presidents, but never Republicans, because, of course, he's a hypocritical loser who should be mocked. Got another clip here from that same interview.
Senator, if former President Trump were to win, if you were to be his vice president, would you support him appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, the Bidens?
Well, first of all, Kristen, I find it interesting how much the media and the Democrats have lost their mind over this particular quote. Donald Trump is talking about appointing a special prosecutor to investigate Joe Biden for wrongdoing. Joe Biden has done exactly that for the last few years and has done far more in addition to that to engage in a campaign of lawfare against his political opposition. I think what Donald Trump is simply saying is we ought to investigate the prior administration. There are obviously many instances of wrongdoing. The House Oversight Committee has identified a number of corrupt business transactions that may or may not be criminal. Of course, you have to investigate to find out. So I think Donald Trump saying, look, let's do the basic work of investigating wrongdoing is a totally reasonable thing for him to do. And frankly, the Biden administration has done far worse. So if you think that what Donald Trump is proposing is a threat to democracy, isn't what Biden has already done a massive threat to our system of law and government?
Senator, just to be very clear, though, Joe Biden didn't appoint a special prosecutor. The attorney general did that. Trump was indicted by grand juries. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers in New York. But can we just go back to the core question here? Would you support him taking such an action? It sounds like you're saying, yes, you would.
I would absolutely support investigating prior wrongdoing by our government. Absolutely. That's what you have to have in a system of law and order, Kristen.
Unless, of course, the prior government happens to be a Republican government, and then that's totally out of bounds. It's totally inappropriate. J.D. Vance would oppose it every step of the way. So Merrick Garland, nor President Biden, nor anyone else in the Biden administration that we're aware of has publicly or even privately called for the prosecution of Donald Trump. There's no evidence, for example, that President Biden pressured Attorney General Garland to prosecute Trump, or that Attorney General Garland pressured Special Counsel Jack Smith to prosecute Trump. Instead, he just gave him the tools and the resources to follow the investigations as he sees fit. But this is the point. Republicans are pure hypocrites. Now, we've talked about this before, where Donald Trump, and this actually comes into play in this next clip I'm about to show you, between Dana Bash of CNN and Marco Rubio, another Republican senator and potential vice presidential candidate alongside Trump, where they discuss the fact that the Department of Justice under President Biden has clearly not been weaponized. But going back to Vance, again, Vance lies, just blatantly lies. The insinuation that President Biden is directing the prosecution of Trump, that's not true. Alvin Bragg doesn't work for President Biden. Fani Willis doesn't work for President Biden or the Department of Justice like Alvin Bragg. And even, again, Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland was not directed by Biden to prosecute Trump. He bent over backwards, particularly with respect to the classified documents case, to not prosecute Trump. Trump was given an enormous length of rope, right? They worked with him for a year privately, more than a year, for him to simply return the national defense documents. And he was not charged for the documents that he did surrender. So Trump was given every opportunity to avoid prosecution, opportunities that no one else would have been. And yet J.D. Vance can't abide, simply cannot tolerate the notion that potentially a Republican just committed a crime and perhaps a Republican should be prosecuted accordingly. Because again, law and order is something that Republicans get to inflict on the rest of us. That is for them to dispense to others. They themselves are above it. They are perfect. They are flawless. Republican administrations are beyond approach. They can't possibly commit anything criminal, and they should never be reviewed or investigated by the next administration. But Republican administrations apparently can investigate Democratic administrations. So he signals public support for what Trump is trying to do. To say nothing of the fact that Trump did not word his threats nearly as carefully as J.D. Vance is trying to launder them. Donald Trump never said, hey, we're going to investigate potential wrongdoing by the previous administration. That still might be inappropriate, but you know what? If it was phrased that way, it would be much more palatable. Instead, Donald Trump has repeatedly called for the prosecution of Democrats, Hunter Biden, the Biden family. It's very clear, very personal, and very, very aggressive. So again, J.D. Vance is lying here. Marco Rubio also lies in this exchange here with Dana Bash. We're going to play the clip and unpack it.
After his allies every single day.
Senator,
and some of these are ridiculous charges.
Senator, Donald Trump has said that he would go after Joe Biden, that he would go after members of the Biden family. That's never something that we've heard
Donald Trump has said that no, he hasn't. And I watched the debate. You guys did a great job. I watched it, and he was asked, and he said, my vengeance will be winning and restoring America, making America great again. He did not say, I'm going to go after them and so forth. Not at the debate, but he has said it elsewhere. Not at the debate. You're right. He said it elsewhere. He has repeatedly said that his revenge will be to make America great again, to undo all their bad public policies.
Well, let me ask you.
He was president for 4 years. He didn't go after Hillary Clinton. He didn't go after Joe Biden. He didn't go after Barack Obama. He didn't go after any of their consultants.
You're telling me
we
right
didn't see
now,
under him what we're seeing now.
You're telling me right now that a second Trump administration would not go after any Democrats, any of his political opponents, full stop. You've confidence that that wouldn't happen?
Yeah. He was president before, and he didn't do it.
So again, you can hear from that pause and the upward inflection, he has no confidence in what he's saying. He's just flagrantly, blatantly lying. And we've read through this article before, but it's, again, worth examining here because Republicans, again, elected Republicans, all they do is lie. They are pathological liars par excellence, particularly in defense of Donald Trump. So they like to rewrite history and suggest, sure, Donald Trump repeatedly publicly called for the prosecution of his enemies in 2016, but after he became president, he never actually tried to do it, except he did. So as noted on MSNBC, on targeting Hillary Clinton, Trump tries to rewrite history. To the extent the reality still has any meaning, let's review the receipts. In Trump's first year in the White House, after the 2016 election was over and Clinton largely withdrew from public view, then President Trump publicly pleaded with the Justice Department to go after Clinton. He did it on Twitter. A year later, in 2018, Donald Trump told the White House counsel that he wanted to order the Justice Department to prosecute Clinton. And he was advised not to do that. He was urged not to do that. Of course, you still have to have people comply. But he tried to do it. Ahead of Election Day 2020, nearly 4 years after Clinton's defeat, Trump again publicly called for Clinton's incarceration and lobbied then Attorney General Bill Barr to prosecute Clinton for reasons unknown. None of this was kept secret. It happened out in the open. We all saw it play out in the public. The problem is, of course, that Trump did target Clinton after the 2016 election and tried to have her prosecuted. It's not a matter of opinion. It's simply what happened, whether the Republican, or in this case, Republicans, assume we've forgotten or not. And I think in many cases, a lot of Republicans have. The last thing I want to remind you of, though, because I love bringing this up, is the ultimate silver bullet. When Donald Trump was president in 2020, a month before the election, he publicly, repeatedly, we have multiple clips to this effect, but I love playing this one because it's so good, so clear. He, then President Trump, called into the Fox Propaganda Network and publicly demanded that his Attorney General Bill Barr prosecute Joe Biden, his political rival, a month before the election, and Barack Obama, an ex-president.
Unless Bill Barr indicts these people for crimes, the greatest political crime in the history of our country, then we're going to get little satisfaction unless I win, and we'll just have to go because I won't forget it. But these people should be indicted. This was the greatest political crime in the history of our country, and that includes Obama, and it includes Biden.
So as far as Republicans and Donald Trump are concerned, it's perfectly acceptable to prosecute, to investigate and to prosecute former presidents, as long as they're Democratic former presidents. Again, folks, this is not a matter of opinion. The Democratic Party has its faults, but elected Republicans are objectively more dishonest, more hypocritical by far. And that's another reason why we can't trust them at all with any levers of power. That's why they have to lose every election. Certainly for the White House, but also in Congress, Senate, gubernatorial races, they can't be trusted. They are cultists. They will say whatever they want, whenever they want, simply to further Donald Trump's agenda. And they can't be trusted with any sort of principles because they have none. It's all about power. Let me know what you think in the comments.